Hi, this is C. Stephen Manley, and this is the story behind my stories.
You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford,
Corey Dr. O,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mott,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is
C. Stephen Manley.
Well, happy spring, everybody, and welcome to the Author Stories Podcast. If you go to hankgarner.com, we've got a new site design I think you're going to like. It's easier to dig through all of the archives of the show. And as always, there's a little search box on the right-hand side and a box where you can sort them in a long list, and you can find an author interview that you like. Also, subscribe to the show. There are buttons over there in the right-hand sidebar as well. If you would like to support the show, there is a link in the right-hand sidebar where you can donate to the show. If you'd like to drop something in the Author Stories tip jar, there's also a link in the top sidebar where if you would like to advertise your product or service in the show, you can do that as well. Thank you so much for listening, and as always, please click on the Amazon links in the show notes and support the authors that come on, and we do appreciate it. After our great author interview today, stay tuned at the end of the show for an audiobook clip from Richard Gleaves, the Jason Crane series. Hey authors, you need an editor in your life, and not just an editor, but an editor that understands you and gets what you're trying to accomplish. That's why you need to visit my good friend Scott Woodley at marlomoss.net and let him take a look at your work. He'll give you a free sample edit. Scott can help you be the best writer you can be. Visit him at marlomoss.net. Inspired sentences and polished paragraphs for print-worthy books at competitive rates and always on time. Offering a full range of editorial and ghostwriting services to self-published and traditionally published authors. Turn your ideas into words and see your dreams become books. Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. We are joining you, good listeners, on a balmy Sunday morning as I talk with my good friend Chuck Manley. You may know him as C. Stephen Manley. He's been on the show before. He is one of the keystroke medium guys whom I love dearly and get to do a lot of stuff with. And, Chuck is one of my favorite writers, and there's a reason for that. And, when you find someone that thinks similarly to the way that you do and likes the same kind of things that you do, and then turns around and produces books that just have you on the edge of your seat and you're like fist pumping the whole time, you know that those are the people that you want to align yourself with. So welcome to the show, Chuck.
Well, thank you so much, Hank. After that introduction, I feel like I should just drop the mic and leave.
And credits. Right. Oh, man. Chuck, thanks for joining me again this morning. I don't know how it is in North Alabama this morning, but we're just about 80 degrees here.
Yeah,
this morning.
It's headed that direction, and it's pretty humid. We got a lot of rain yesterday, so
yeah.
You know how it is in the South. Going to be an awful long by about noon.
You're right. It's pretty steamy and sticky already. But you know what else is steamy is Master of Hounds, your new book that I've been reading.
Not erotica.
It's not erotica. That was a horrible segue, but I tried. Oh man! So before we get into the new book, what have you been up to? It's been maybe close to a year since you've been on the show.
Something about right.
Something about right. Yeah, some close to it. Maybe 10 months or so. You have a number of science fiction books out. You also write urban fantasy. This book is a little of both and kind of none of what you have done before, all at the same time. What have you been up to since you were on the show last? And then let's talk about what was the motivation was for this new book.
Okay. Well, as far as what I've been up to, I can't remember what I had just released the last time I spoke with you, but I put out a short story collection called Walking Worlds. It was a multi-genre collection with some urban fantasy and some science fiction and some superhero stuff. You know, just a little grab bag of goodies in there. And it did. You know, short story collections are real hard to sell. So I recently just pulled that down off of sale, and I'm going to offer it as a sign-up bonus for my newsletter and stuff that I'm actually going to start doing. And so I had that out, and I was about, 20 or 30,000 words into the third Brace Cordova space opera series book. It's called The Cordova Pursuit. And this idea for Master of Hounds came up, and it was one of those things where my best friend said something to me that sort of sparked the idea, and then I started writing the story in my head, and I had all these visions in my head of these scenes. And, you know, I know you've read some of it, so you know there's kind of some horrific scenes in there. And they just kept replaying on the big screen in my head, and I knew the only way to get them out of my head was to write the damn book. So I put Cordova Pursuit on the back burner, and I started working on Master of Hounds, and, you know, now a few months later, here I am. So it's, you know, I've been in between that and the kids are wrapping up school, and I got softball and band practices, and, you know, the family keeps me busy. So it's, you know, been not a lot of downtime.
I know the feeling. Our oldest son Ian graduated from Mississippi State this week with his bachelor's. So that's off, and then he's getting married in the fall. And yeah, and he's going to be teaching school this year while he works on his master's degree.
What's he teaching?
English. He's going to middle school English, and so he's excited. And we're gonna. We started a little pilot project, and you're really one of the only people that knows about this, and I'll talk about it a little bit finally, where our local school, we did a writing contest for middle school and high school kids, where, and we kind of did it as a pilot to see what it was going to take to kind of launch it bigger and all of that, because there's a lot of things you don't know until you try it. And so we worked with the school our kids are in and did a lot of, writing projects with them and some critiques, and just kind of really wanting to stoke the interest of kids to get into reading, first and foremost, but writing especially. And Ian is going to help us to take that to a bigger stage this year, since he'll be in the education system. So we're pretty excited about that. And the school that has already given him a contract just kind of gave him carte blanche and said, you know, whatever you want to do, we'll give you the budget to do it. And we're excited about, you know, raising literacy and writing literacy. And so yeah, it's pretty exciting times.
Yeah, man. I think that's a fantastic program. And hey, I'm just a few hours up the road.
I know.
So if you need some help, give me a holler. I'll come down and talk about writing or something.
Absolutely. We're going to do some workshops, and all that's going to start taking shape hopefully in the next month or two. So those of you listening, I'm going to be calling on you for to donate some books that we can give to kids, and to be donating some wisdom. So everybody keep your ears open for that. So anyway, I know what you mean about the end of the school year. It seems like everything just ramps up, and
it's just constant.
It is. And then, you know, the writing kind of takes a back seat, or at least a side seat, where, you know, you wind up staying up late at night to finish things. And
well, you know what I ran into is, you know, I do the keystroke medium thing with the guys, which is, you know, I love it. It's just a lot of fun. And that one I don't have to put a lot of work into. I just kind of show up and run my mouth and look awkward on camera. But then I also have the Story Shots podcast, which I was doing. And I haven't done one of those in like 3 or 4 weeks because I've been so busy. I had to pick between working on the book and doing the podcast, because that's a little more time consuming, because that's just me. So the podcast is kind of falling on the back burner, and I know I don't have a huge audience, but there's a few folks out there that I know are kind of like, all right, man, I know you said you were going to do this thing, so where is it?
Well, you know what's weird?
But the writing's got to come first. That's the love.
Right. And what's weird about doing the podcast is you think nobody's listening out there. And then one day you start hearing from people and they're like, man, I've been listening. I never commented because, I didn't think you ever wanted to hear from people. And you're like, what?
No, that is so the opposite of true.
That is so the opposite.
I mean, it's just, and I'm going to say that for writing too, because I see that people read my books. Okay. I see it on the KDP Unlimited, pages read. I see it in the sales. I don't make a ton of sales, but there's, I know thousands of people in different countries around the world have read my books.
Right.
I have very few reviews. I have very few signups to my email list. I never get like quote unquote fan mail or anything like that. So a lot of times it feels like you're just sort of shouting into the void until you look at the numbers and you know that there's some people out there that are actually consuming what you're putting out. And I just, to any readers that are listening, hey, reach out. We love to hear from you. Tell us to keep working. Because sometimes you just kind of get to this set of, why the hell am I doing this? Nobody cares,
Exactly. I think people have this kind of skewed perception of, artist, and I've got air quotes up, I've got, because
Sure.
we don't take ourselves seriously at all.
Right.
But, this idea that maybe we're too busy doing what we do to talk to people, or, as a reader, like, well, I mean, what do I have to contribute? Man, you have everything to contribute. People, artists want to hear from you for that encouragement, we need to connect with people just like you need to connect with people.
Right.
And so, yeah.
But as a caveat to that, though, you always have to follow Wheaton's first rule, which is don't be a dick.
Absolutely.
If there's something in a book you don't like, feel free to tell me about it. Just do it intelligently and respectfully, because even if I screw up something, a lot of work went into that mistake.
Exactly. Yeah.
And another thing is, I think from a writer perspective, a lot of times, as far as discouragement goes, I think that, especially with newer authors, you do that writing and then it seems like you're like doing it into the void and they quit. Yeah. Because I think a lot of times there's this tendency to focus more on the outcome of the work as opposed to the work itself. Speaking for myself, I write because I have to, because that's my passion. That's what I've always done. If nobody ever reads it, I will still be writing stories or, role-playing scenarios for my gaming friends, whatever, because that's just what I do. So when I'm working, I try really hard to just focus on the fact that I'm doing something I love. And if I do it well enough, somebody out there is going to love it too. And I don't worry about getting those big numbers and all that stuff until that's what you need to focus on. I think a lot of people make the mistake of thinking about the outcome while they're doing the work instead of focusing on the work.
Right, exactly. And it is a precarious place for a writer who is an indie writer, especially, who, the entire balance of your business sits on your shoulders, and you have to do all of the work, and you do want to see a return for your work.
Sure.
We do what we do because we love it, and I don't know a single person, and I'm sure there's some out there, but I've not met them yet, who started writing a book to get rich and then pursued that all the way through. Some of those ideas may come later, and I'm making no judgment call whatsoever on people that write for profit or write for love. I think it's a balance of both. So, I'm not getting into that conversation.
Right.
But it's, when you start out, everybody starts out because they love telling a story, and they want to see their words in print. They want to have one person out there that their story connects with, that they can say, I made an indelible mark on somebody somewhere. Maybe if it's just to make them laugh, maybe if it's just to get them out of a funk and take them on an adventure, while they're going through a bad place in life, or maybe it's because you have stumbled onto a piece of wisdom you want to share with somebody. But nobody starts because they want to cash in and get rich. This is the wrong business to get in if that's what you think is going to happen.
So true. So true. I think it's just a matter of segmenting the two mindsets in your head. There's the creator mindset and the business person mindset. And while you're creating, focus on making the best creation you can make. And then when you put on the business hat, you focus on putting that in people's hands and building relationships and all that stuff. Because, if there's one thing I've learned since I started doing this, and I'm coming up on 4 years as an indie now, is that, I can confidently, without, I think, sounding too arrogant, say that I can write a pretty good book. And when it comes to selling books, I can write a pretty good book. It's just two different worlds for me, and I don't see how you can blend them like so many other people can. You see all these guys out there who are just killing it, and you're like, I don't know. There's some kind of disconnect there in my head between the business and the artistic aspects of it. So I have no trouble keeping them separate. I know some other people, though, they can blend them together, and they've got this, delicious success smoothie that they sip from every day.
Yeah, and I think you and I both know some of those people pretty well, and it's that delicious success smoothie is really about 2 full-time jobs wrapped into one.
It really kind of is.
Yeah, when you start peeling back the layers, these guys are putting in 80 hours a week.
Absolutely. And
grinding
when
the mill.
You have kids and stuff, that makes it even more difficult.
Right. And I think talking to I think Craig Martell and Michael Anderley are two great examples
Those
of
guys
that.
Are beasts.
Oh, they are beasts. But Craig especially will tell you, that when you have a family and you're raising small kids and stuff, that's your focus. It has to be your focus then. And you keep working your art and your craft and working on that in the background. And when it's time for that to take, to move to the front burner, then that's when it moves to the front burner. Yeah. But, if you find publishing success at the expense of your family, I don't know anyone that's willing to take that trade. I'm sure not,
It's not worth it.
It's not worth it. It's not worth it. As long as there's somebody out there that's connecting with what we do and we get to keep honing the craft, I think most people are excited to get to keep doing that every day.
Right. And I'm always just excited about new ideas and, and seeing them to fruition, and honestly, I think, aside from family and kids and seeing my kids do well and stuff like that, the best satisfaction I get in life is getting that idea and seeing it through and getting feedback like you've been giving me on Master of Hounds and stuff. So it's just, I don't know, it's you gotta, it's like the SPP guys are always saying, you got to know your why.
Yeah. You
got to know why you're doing it.
That's right. How'd you get involved with keystroke? You are a panel member now, or whatever you guys call yourselves, co-host. And every Monday, if I'm not recording a show while I'm doing some of the other contract work that I work on every morning, the web stuff, I always open up a new tab and I'm at least listening in, and I try to comment when I can, but that's like I look forward to 11 o'clock Mondays, tuning into Keystroke and seeing what you guys are up to.
Yeah, we always have a lot of fun. I think ultimately what it boils down to is that Scott and Josh thought I looked really, really lonely and isolated and took pity on me.
They wanted your voice.
Is, I think it was Scott I connected with first on the self-publishing Smarter Artist Facebook group. And I don't know, I said something, I commented, and he's like, hey, we should have you on the show sometime. I'm like, sure, man, be happy to. I was be happy to do it. So I went on with him, and, we had a blast. And we were talking, I think it was when my first Brace Cordova book had come out, and we were, talking about space opera and all that stuff, because that's a very science fiction focused show. Most of the audience and everybody is really, it's science fiction and fantasy, but there's a definite science fiction bend to it. And I think that's what got me in the door, was the fact I'd just written my very first space opera ever in my life. But so we had a lot of fun with that one, and they invited me back for a second show. And when I had done something else, I can't even remember now. And after that, they just sent me an email one day and said, "Hey, man, we're looking to add another co-host, and we thought you'd be great, and you look lonely and isolated, so why don't you, jump in there with us?" So
you were that cousin that comes for a visit, just never leaves.
Yeah, that's kind of it. I keep telling them I'm the perpetual unpaid intern. I'm the guy that's going to retire as an intern, and I just kind of sit back and shut up and do what I'm told and look awkward on camera while they actually talk to people. So
I love it.
I always think every time I do, because I'm going to be honest with you, and I'm not even going to pull punches. I feel like a total ass every time I do one of these things. Like any kind of interview, every time I do one of the KM shows, they're fun, but I'm looking at that freaking webcam like it's like the eye of Sauron just zooming in on my forehead, and I'm thinking to myself, what are you doing, you jackass? You have no business being on camera.
You realize that's why this is an audio podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, there's no way I'm staring into a camera for 300 and something episodes. No, not gonna happen.
I always feel like though as I go, because I'll go back and rewatch them just to make sure the sound was okay on my mic and stuff like that. Just kind of zip through them. But a lot of times I'll watch them and I think I'm Ed McMahon. I'm just the guy that sits on the couch while Johnny's doing the interview and laughs in all the appropriate places. I'm the straight man. I don't know what McMahon's title would have been, but I'm just that guy that's just kind of. I'm the sidekick. So funny.
I'm terrified that if I was on camera that one of the dogs is going to come in and I'm going to be, getting them out of my trash can under my desk or something.
Yeah, well, that you don't have to get dressed.
Right, and the guests would be, "What the hell are you doing?" And never mind. Yeah. I'm totally listening. I promise.
I was playing around with my camera the other day. I was looking at doing little recordings or something to supplement the story shots, and I got my wife one of those damn Roomba vacuum cleaner things for Christmas.
Right.
And I'm sitting here and it's recording and I'm thinking, okay, this is going pretty good. And all of a sudden I hear, and it comes in and hits the tripod the camera's sitting on and knocks it all askew. I'm just like, you know what? The hell with it.
Oh my God, that's amazing. That is amazing. Oh, jeez.
Speaking of keystroke medium. I would like to encourage everyone out there to not only join us on Mondays at 11 a.m. Central on YouTube and at the Keystroke Medium website can have links and stuff like that, but also to visit keystrokemedium.com because we are doing the Keystroke Medium Reader's Choice Awards. So if you've got an indie book out there that you really enjoyed over the last, I guess it would have been in 2017 now, go to keystrokemedium.com and find the Reader's Choice Award link and throw that nomination up there because we want to recognize people who have jumped into this indie pool and put out quality work and stuff. So I want to encourage everybody to do that.
Absolutely. We definitely encourage everyone to do that. And Keystroke Medium is easy to find because if you go to hankgarner.com and you look over the right-hand sidebar, there's a big old square on there that says "Visit my friends at Keystroke Medium," and just scroll down there, hit the button, and you'll find all of the stuff that you need to.
That's right. Just
right
look for the space helmet.
Yep, look for the space helmet. That's right. So Chuck, speaking of, you talked about your Brace Cordova series, and then you've got your other series that's kind of urban fantasy meets kind of cyberpunk, I guess, maybe?
You talking about the Paragons Trilogy?
Yes, the Paragons Trilogy.
That's actually more of, now that it's a few years behind me and I'm done with it, I look back on it. It's kind of a X-Men meets Lovecraftian horror kind of thing. Because it involves people who have, there's no capes and cowls and, secret identities and all that kind of stuff. But it's about these two people who they wake up together in a modern day dungeon. They have no idea how they got there. They're total strangers, complete polar opposite in personality and stuff like this. And they wake up in this dungeon which is essentially just a big old basement. And they find that they've been drugged and put on gurneys. And as they start exploring, they discover there's been a big firefight, and there's these people who have this weird, like, residue stuff on them. And they discover that there's a hidden history to the world, and that 10,000 years or so ago, some extra-dimensional entities visited Earth while humankind was still living in trees and caves, and they started playing around with our DNA. And when they got bored with that, they just left. And so you had all these creatures that they had sort of manipulated. And over the centuries, these creatures started developing abilities. And when the other quote unquote normal people saw these abilities, well, they had to explain them somehow. So they started making up these stories about them. And from that, we got our myths and legends, Hercules and Artemis and Thor and all these guys. And there were actually people back then that had these superpowers, but the stories that grew out of them weren't necessarily the truth, because it was people from the outside looking in telling the stories. And fast forward to modern day, and you've got this hidden world, which in the books I call it the veiled world. And under that umbrella are all these people who have these genetic awakenings, basically, that give them, there's kind of ranks of it. You can have an awakening that gives you just like a weird skin tone or something like that, all the way up to what they call paragons. And paragons are like the super powered people. These are the people who have like genuine abilities. Now, again, they don't go out and fight crime and put on costumes and stuff like that. They actually try to stay hidden, because there's still, billions and billions and billions of normal humans that would probably freak out and try to kill them if they found out they were a real thing. And it turns out that the two people that woke up in the dungeon are paragons. And the trilogy is basically them dealing with that and the threats, because there are other groups and secret societies and things that want to use the paragons and the people with powers to take over and do all kinds of weird and evil stuff. So you've got these two characters trying to get through all that and how the world changes and stuff like that from them being who they are. I think that kind of sums it up.
Yeah. So in your writing, there are some common threads that I notice, and I pick these things out because I find that there's a lot of the same common threads, or at least things that are informed by things.
Yeah.
And you seem to have this love of looking at the story behind the story, and of looking at, and this is one thing that I love about urban fantasy, and I hate that name, urban fantasy, because I think that makes people have a very narrow view of what we're really talking about.
Right.
But we're
also
looking
misused a lot.
It is misused a lot. But and a lot of things get lumped in there because we don't have a better word for it. There's, and some of our genre designations are really weak. And I understand about commerce informing all that, and and you need to be able to label things so people can find it. I get all that. I don't like it, but I get it. Yeah. But there's this idea of living in the mundane world, but the idea that something else is going on. And, it's maybe why the TV show Supernatural, and I think you're a big fan of that.
Huge fan.
I have not really gotten to watch it other than just a little bit on and off throughout the years. So I'm really not that well versed in it, but I get the idea of it, and I love the idea of it. And maybe that's why that show has lasted so long on TV when so many other things come and go, because there is this idea that, that there are heroic things still going on, and still things that scare us that we don't understand, even in the midst of just kind of the common everyday world. And being a kid, growing up with sci-fi and fantasy and comic books, all that stuff kind of culminates into these weird stories that we tell when we're adults.
I agree. And I think you hit when you said the things we're afraid of that we don't understand. I think you hit on the nature of fear.
Right.
The cure for fear is knowledge and understanding, And I also think, though, and I see what you're saying. And honestly, I didn't know this I don't go into a book thinking about, okay, this is going to be my theme.
Right.
You know, I had this idea, and I just sort of, you know, I do the little bit of plotting and whatnot that I do beforehand, and then I start writing, and themes just sort of kind of organically come out of that. Now, a lot of times, especially with Paragons, and it came out in Master of Hounds too, it kind of touches on the nature of truth. You know, a lot of times we are certain we know what's happening because we're limited in the information sources that we have. But if those information sources are flawed or misleading, there's a deeper truth that we don't know that's behind the sources of our knowledge. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think a lot of times I like to play with that because that thing we don't know, it can be anything, you know. And if you like in Supernatural, if you take it and you turn it into something where you can imagine there is a greater truth, there is a greater reality, and life's not just this mundane 9 to 5, take a vacation every year kind of existence. You know, it's kind of, there's excitement to that there's that unknown that, yeah, it's scary, but God, wouldn't it be cool to find out what's going on over there, you know?
Yeah. Well, it's why we flip over to the History Channel and watch TV shows that have nothing to do with you know, history books.
Sure.
What we're going to learn in school, because we want to know that there's something that this is not all that we, you know, maybe our past, we were heroic, and maybe we can be that way again. Maybe, you know, maybe there were, you know, people from another planet that came and visited us, and what would that mean for our future? You know, it helps us to escape the, you know, that this is just, this is not just our lot in life.
Right.
Maybe.
You know, I actually had not really an argument, but I went over last night to an old friend of mine's house. I used to work with him at the hospital here in town, and hadn't seen him in years and years. And we were watching a hockey game together. And the subject, he was asking me about the books and stuff. And I just said, well, you know, all entertainment is escapism. And he said, well, no, that's not true, because we're watching hockey and hockey's real. And I'm like, no. I said, what are you thinking about right now? And he said, I'm thinking about this game. I'm thinking about this. He named a player. I can't remember. You know, I wanted him to do well. And I'm like, that's right. Are you thinking about that you got to get up and go to work Monday morning? Are you thinking about your kids being in college? Are you thinking about your house payment? Are you thinking about all the bullshit you have to deal with in life? No, you're escaping from that by getting into this sporting event and letting all of that stuff go off to the side while you enjoy this entertainment. I said, some people do sports, some people do science fiction, some people do Hallmark movies, some people do exercise for that escapism, but everyone needs that escapism. So as a writer, I like my escapism as far from reality as possible.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, there's another thing, and we touched on it a minute ago, talking about fear, is that when we can put a face on fear, or put, you know, if we can see it, we can touch it, we can go through the emotions of it without actually being in harm.
Sure.
Maybe, you know, living fear vicariously through a character.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I was a kid, I was a scared kid when I was young. I remember just being scared of a lot of things, and I don't even know what that was about, but I just remember, you know, being scared of the dark and all kind of stuff. We lived way out in the country, had no neighbors, and, you know, you'd go outside, there's no lights, everything's pitch black, and just being scared of everything all the time. And I had friends that loved horror movies and stuff, you know, when we were you know, younger teenagers and stuff like that. And I just always stayed away from them because I just didn't want to go through that again. You know, it's like, I don't want to be scared on purpose. You know, I finally have grown out of that stuff. I don't want to go right back into that, you know, and plus, you know, growing up in the Bible Belt in the 70s and 80s, you know, where there was a devil behind every bush, you know, literally, and, you know, record burnings, and, you know, D&D is going to send you to hell and all that kind of stuff.
I was actually telling some 20-something friends of mine about the Satanic Panic and living through that.
Oh, my kids just laugh their
Yeah,
heads
I know.
off. You know, I mean,
think-
yeah, and they look down. They're like, "Really, Ozzy? That's what you were scared of?"
Right.
And he's bouncing off walls, slobbering all over himself, right? Yeah, the devil's all
He's not
powerful.
doing
Yeah,
well.
right. Hail Satan. Okay, right. Okay, and they just laugh. And I was like, "No, you don't understand. That was real. That was
newspaper articles, TV shows. I mean, I stumbled across on YouTube. I think it was 60 Minutes or one of those TV news programs from back then, and they
2020
were just like,
had a big
D&D. Is it killing your children?
right.
Like, what, are you fucking kidding me? Seriously? Sorry, man. I know you don't need to get too blue on these.
Oh well, we have an explicit tag just in case
because you knew I'd be here.
Well, Patrick Rothfuss did that. When he came on and he dropped like 18 F-bombs in the first 3 minutes. I said, well, from now on the podcast is just going to have an E on it on iTunes because just in case. And yeah, and conversation is conversation. I'm not going to tell people how to react. So that's where I stand on it. But it just. I tell them about it and they laugh. They think it's hilarious. But then it was, and my wife grew up totally different than I did, and she watched horror movies and all this, and her family didn't have all the hang-ups that my family had. Her parents listen to Richard Pryor and stuff like that. Right. And, just complete culture difference.
I
know. Live on Sunset Strip is still amazing. So she would laugh at me about not wanting to watch horror movies. And over the last few years, I have become a horror movie junkie. And it's kind of funny because I watched it in the theater with my whole family last year, and I absolutely loved it.
I thought that was the best, adaptation from the novel of that. And I can't wait to see the second part. I mean, they did such a good job with that.
Yeah, it was really
and I'm
good.
noticing a kind of a return to, especially since Stranger Things was so popular. There was a certain kind of horror that got done in the late 70s, the 80s, a little bit into the early 90s, and it was that Stephen King kind of not George Lucas, but Steven Spielberg kind of, there was just a certain tone to it. And Stranger Things recaptured that because that sort of faded and you started getting into just a lot of jump scares, a lot of gross out scenes. It was more about the graphic than it was about the suspense.
Exactly.
And I'm starting to see us drift back to the suspense.
Yes.
Because that to me is just quality entertainment. Back in the 80s when they were making all the Freddy Kruegers and the Jasons and all the splatterpunk stuff. I mean, yeah, it was entertaining in its way, but to me that wasn't horror. You know what I'm saying? That was just shock scares kind of things. And I really like that we're sort of going back to that. It's more about the suspense of the unknown than it is about how graphically are you going to get murdered in this next scene.
Well, it's what made Hitchcock a genius.
Exactly. Perfect example.
Yeah, it's what's off the screen that is way more scary than the bucket of blood.
It's what you don't know.
It's what you don't know. Yeah. And him shooting, I don't know if it was all, but at least the great majority of all his stuff was black and white, which definitely added to that because, there's, a bucket of blood in black and white just doesn't do what it does, in 4K Ultra HD.
There's a starkness to black and white that adds to that kind of genre. That
shadows are real shadows.
Exactly. Yeah, it's just there's a depth to it. I think that's perfect for suspense storytelling. Yeah.
Well, one thing that I loved about it, and I've been a fan of The Stand and a few of his other things for years, but one thing I love about what Stephen King does, and I see this commonality in your writing, I'm bringing it back around to you.
Wow. Okay.
It is that Stephen King has this way, and it's just absolutely genius, that he paints Mayberry in those first few chapters. It's every town, USA. All of his characters are obviously in New England, and they have their little New England idiosyncrasies and their vernacular and their slang and stuff like that. But you get past that real quick and you fall into these people because they're just like everybody else in your small town. And then all hell breaks loose after you have kind of fallen in love with these people in these places. But it's the way that he connects you emotionally to the people first. And then you care that all of this stuff is happening to them. And you have that ability too, that you open the page and I just immediately, I connect with these characters because they are, they're people just like the people I encounter, every day. Except for, in your new book, Master of Hounds, the characters you meet first off are, I don't want to give away too much, but they're like law enforcement officers, but of a different stripe.
Yeah, they're black bag guys. They're the men in black, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And I told Dawn when I was first started reading, I was like, oh, this kind of feels like Bright, that Netflix movie with Will Smith. And, at first I was like, oh, I love where he's going with this. And, so is that something you think about, with your character development, like before, everything goes sideways, are you concerned with characters first, or are you concerned with plot first? I have a catchphrase. It's actually I had business cards made up for some insane reason. I never give them out, but on the business card, I have what I consider my motto for my work, and that is real characters, unreal situations. So I think that the whole point of pulling a reader into a book or a movie, for that matter, they need to be relatable. You need to feel like you're saying, like, this is somebody that you could meet on the street or in a coffee shop or whatever, and then you thrust them into the crazy of whatever it is you're trying to tell. So I guess in a lot of ways I do put character first, in the sense that when I'm thinking about a book, whether the situation or the character comes to me first, I always try to make sure that within the first few chapters, there's enough of that character that the person reading it can go, oh yeah, I know that guy. I know a guy just like that, and I bet he would react the same way if he saw this, monster coming down the street or whatever. So I think it's really that kind of character development, I think, is really important to a successful story. It's just your reader needs to be drawn in, and they need to care. They need to care whether or not this character is going to succeed. If you don't have that, they're just going to put the book down and go find something more interesting to do. So you got to have characters that people care about and put them in situations where the reader is worried that this character might get eaten or blown up or whatever. So. But thank you for that. That was a very high compliment comparing me to Stephen King. Oh, well, yeah. Well, I mean it. That's what I love about what he does, and those are stories that I find myself seeking out lately. Is that I want to see real characters, and I want to see how the world goes crazy for them, because I think that helps me to juggle when my world goes crazy, that I can connect with someone, Did
I ever tell you this story about my name?
No.
Since we brought up Stephen King?
No.
I was, my full name is Chuck Stephen Manley, and I write under C. Stephen Manley, like he said, but I was actually born Charles Lester Rittenhouse III.
Like you do?
Yeah. And my stepfather, when I was about 8 years old, he adopted me, and he said, okay, you can you got to have Manley as your last name, but you can pick your other two names. So if you don't like being called Chuck, you can change that, whatever. So I was like I said, I was 8 years old, and I figured my name was Charles, but everybody called me Chuck, so I just kept Chuck as my first name. And then I had just, against my mother's wishes, stolen her copy of, I think it was Salem's Lot. And I had just finished reading Salem's Lot, and I was just enamored with Stephen King. So I made my middle name Stephen, but being 8 years old and not knowing what I was doing, I spelled it with a V instead of a PH. And thus, C. Stephen Manley with a V was born.
I had no idea, but that is freaking amazing. An 8-year-old kid that names himself after Stephen King.
That's right, man.
That
this was like,
is amazing.
this would have been 1975, I guess, 76.
Oh, God, that's amazing. I love that. I love that so much. Oh, man. Well, yeah, and so you've got to live up to the namesake.
I'm trying.
Well, let's talk for a minute about Clint Mercer.
Okay.
He's kind of one of the main protagonists in the story. Clint works at a hospital. He's a former paratrooper.
United States Air Force pararescueman.
Pararescueman. Okay.
Yep.
I didn't know the proper terminology, but what is a pararescueman? This is someone that jumps out of airplanes and goes and rescues people. The EMTs with a parachute?
Well, they're actually considered among the elite soldiers, like the SEALs and Force Recon for the Marines. Guys like Rangers, guys like that.
Right.
But they don't get, as far as I'm aware, they don't get as much press. But basically, they come in a variety of different flavors. There's what they call combat controllers, and then there's guys who specialize in sea rescues. But they're essentially the joke is that even Navy SEALs have to call EMTs once in a while,
Right.
And so, like when you need a high risk rescue or a high risk thing done, these are the guys who come in and do it. They have medical training. They have depending on their specialty, they have different types of training. And Clint, I actually when I was in the Air Force, one of my great regrets is I had a chance to sort of audition and try out for pararescue training. And I don't remember what happened, but for some reason I didn't do it. And that has always nagged at me over the years. There was something else. I had some kind of conflict, and I chose the other thing over the pararescue training. So in a lot of ways, Clint is me kind of expressing the regret I have at not taking that opportunity when I had it. But he's a former USAF pararescueman turned emergency room nurse. He has a reason that he got out of the Air Force pararescue position that, you'll have to read the book to find out. And he's working in his ER one night and things go crazy and he gets sucked into the world of magic and monsters and warlocks and all this stuff. So,
I have never worked in the medical field, but I have spent a lot of time in hospitals with kids, and both of my in-laws, my wife's parents have passed away, and we spend a lot of time at hospitals with both of them. And, just like you do, when you're raising
sure.
Families, and I could tell that you have more than a passing familiarity with hospitals and the medical establishment and all that, because that was another thing that like if I'm writing a scene and there's a hospital in it, I am going to glaze over that as quickly as I can. I'm going to get the reader in and out of there as quickly as I can, because I will be out of my depth very quickly. But you paint that scene very believably. And I think when we talked before, you have worked in the medical field in different ways. What is your what is your specialty in that area? I was a cardiovascular technologist for about 13 years, I guess. I worked in cardiac and trauma surgery. A lot of people hear that and go, "What?" And I'd say, look, it boils down to this. I work with blood reclamation and anything doing with like your vascular system. So if you have a bad cut and you're bleeding to death, you want to see the doctor, the nurse, and then me. That's the way. Right. That's kind of the way it goes. But yes, actually, the Master of Hounds is set here in Huntsville. I've always wanted to write a book in my hometown, and I'd go through this in the author's note in the book, but the circumstances that gave me the idea, it was like, okay, this is perfect. So the hospital that Clint works in, that's the hospital I worked in for all those years. And so all that stuff where they're going out the back into the elevator up to the parking deck, it's been a long time since I worked there, but to the best of my recollection, that's the way the hospital was laid out when I worked there.
So pretty much everywhere in this book is someplace I have actually been in the real world. And that was so much fun because if I wanted, like, I had this one scene set in a large cemetery here in town. So I just drove over to the cemetery one day with my notebook and my pen and my phone and took pictures and, you know, wrote down notes and measured stuff to see how far it is from here to there. How fast could somebody run that? You know, stuff like that, plotting out the scene for myself. So it's really nice because, like, if I'm writing something in Atlanta, well, that's like a 3-hour drive. So I have to use Google Earth and stuff like that for that. So, but yeah, as far as the hospital thing goes, it's just that's my wife's an RN. Who she was just out of nursing school when I met her at that same hospital, and now she works on she works for the big medical companies, you know, working in the hospitals with the doctors and stuff. And so yeah, I've that's pretty much been what I call my first career was healthcare, and I spent like a year working mental health at a mental health facility before I started working at the place here in Huntsville. And so that's where I got it, you know, in the book, you discover that using magic takes a certain physical toll on people. And one of the characters there has like some mental health issues that have to be dealt with because of his use of magic. So I had a little bit of exposure there as far as things, you know, symptoms and things that would show up if people had those particular issues. So yeah, that's pretty much my background professionally is healthcare.
Why Huntsville, and how difficult was it placing, needing to be correct about things? And right before we started recording, we were talking about that your wife called you out because you have a neighborhood there, and she said, well, this type of situation would not be in that neighborhood; it would actually be this. So why did you want to set it in your hometown? And is it more difficult because you have to be accountable for getting things right?
When I initially started writing, well, as to the why my hometown, I don't know. I just did, you know, because you drive through your hometown and I'd see things and I'd be like, oh, it'd be cool. You could really do something with that over there. You know, that would be a fun place for an exciting thing to happen. So I had all these things bouncing around in my head, all these little locations. And then when the idea came up, it just kind of fit. Now, as far as the second part of your question, yes, my wife is currently reading the book for me. And in the very first chapter, the neighborhood that scene takes place in, she called me in there and said, this is Low Avenue. And I'm like, yeah. They would not have chain link fences. They would have wrought iron fences. And people will know that. You need to change this. And I was like, I could have lived to be 150 and never thought of that. And I'm sure as hell, man, I guarantee you, if I drive over to Low Avenue now and just go down and look at the houses, any place that has, there's not going to be a chain link fence in sight because that's just that's the type of neighborhood that is. But she picks up on stuff like that all the time. She does not like science fiction and fantasy unless it's mine. And I don't know if that's just because she loves me or what, but she is like, for little nuances like that, she is my very best beta reader. She picks up on stuff that I wouldn't think of in a million years.
Well, and I've been to Huntsville a lot of times, but I don't know neighborhoods like that. But if I lived there, I would never have picked out that because I would have been so engrossed in the stuff going on, you know. So I guess it takes that kind of reader who doesn't just go to her happy place because it's, fantasy going on. You know, she's able to be more objective. So
yeah, and I never leave the house, so it's good. It's good that there's somebody and she's my agent to the outside world.
Yeah, I'm kind of like that too, and my wife says that she said, if you weren't married to me, you would never go out and talk to anybody. I'm like, well, I talk to people on the internet all day long. Why do I have to talk to people in real life?
Really. I like it here.
I live here on purpose. This is where I like it. Tell me about Arlo Dandridge.
Arlo Dandridge is when I was deciding on the kind of relationship I wanted between Clint and Arlo. I was reminded of do you remember the TV show Psych?
Yes.
Okay. Well, in that show, Sean and Gus are like best friends. Sean's this hyper observant detective guy. He sees everything. but he doesn't always understand what he's seeing. So the relationship between Clint and Arlo is a wizard who he calls himself a magus, but essentially he's a wizard. And he's the one that has the mental problems because he uses so much magic. And he is kind of not real social. You know, he puts people off. He's very Sherlock Holmesian in that respect. He doesn't have the hyper observant skills. He is a genius. He uses magic. He's kind of an asshole. And the relationship between him and Clint is very much a Holmesian Watson kind of relationship. But it leans a little more in the direction of Sean and Gus. You know, they snipe at each other and stuff like that. And he's brilliant. He's a genius. He's filthy freaking rich, and he has to have someone with him to act as a buffer between him and the rest of society most of the time. And it gets a lot worse when he's working a case and has to use a lot of his abilities, because using the abilities makes him more and more kind of unstable. So Clint kind of fits the bill perfectly because he's trained in medical techniques and helping people. He's a registered nurse. So he kind of knows how to deal with these high stress, people in distress kind of situations. So him and Arlo are, you know, they get off to a rough start, but there's a kind of relationship there I hope to build on in the future books. I got 2 more planned, Child of Magic and Mother of Warlocks, respectively. So, you know, he was a lot of fun to write. The thing about Arlo is that because he can, like, his personality can just turn on a dime if something triggers him. You know, he's kind of fun in his unpredictableness to write, whereas Clint's like the anchor. You know, his guiding light is helping people in the greatest way he can. You know, save the people. That's all he really gives a damn about. Whereas Arlo is more just kind of all over the place, with his only focus being accomplish the mission. So it was a lot of fun writing those guys.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big fan of all of your writing. I love your sci-fi stuff. I love Paragons. I'm a big fan. But
well,
when
I appreciate
reading, well, sure. But in reading Master of Hounds, I had the feeling, I was like, this is Chuck. Like, you know, I was like, this is Chuck's voice. This is not that the other stuff wasn't. So I hesitate to say anything, but I think readers, when they read it, will know what I'm saying. Is that there's there are things that we can do well, and then there are things that are just a natural outpouring of who we are.
Yeah, it felt that way writing, and I'll be honest about it. And honestly, yeah. I think Clint and Arlo are like the 2 disparate parts of my personality that go to war with each other when I'm conflicted about something.
Yeah.
So I think that in a lot of ways, if you put those 2 guys together, it's kind of me in the story, which I don't know if it's bad form for a writer to admit that, but I don't give a damn. So...
No, I completely agree with you. And, you can tell that this is the natural story that you wanted to tell. And, I think it comes out in the writing. It comes out in the way the book, is structured. And, I hope you do a lot more of this.
I think I will. But I have to finish the Brace Cordova series, or the people that are fans of that, I think, will start hunting me for sport if I don't.
Well, and they know all about Huntsville now, so you're not going to be that
difficult. Hank, I can't thank you enough for the praise, man. That means a lot. I appreciate it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Well, I have taken up an hour of your Sunday morning, so we're gonna go here in a minute. But I want everybody to go pick up a copy of Master of Hounds. We talked earlier about the genre and how we classify books like this. What do you classify Master of Hounds at? Because I think, when you think urban fantasy, you think Dresden Files, you think a couple of other series, and, that's not always a great description, and Huntsville's not exactly an urban metropolis.
From a perspective of the bisect categories and the Amazon categories and stuff, I classify it as a dark urban fantasy, because there are some pretty, intense scenes in there with the bad guys. But I like I like stories that are, this is an urban fantasy with just a little bit of a slant. And I go ahead and give away the slant because Arlo, within the setting, there's a conservative and a progressive view of magic. And the progressive view is kind of trying to find that intersection between magic and science. Because really, when I think about magic, to me, magic are the cheat codes of the universe. You know, if reality's the video game, magic's the cheat codes. So that there has to be some kind of point where those two things intersect. You know, that's the progressive view, and that's kind of where Arlo leans towards. So he always sounds like a professor or something when he's talking about magic. But the more conservative view of magic in the book are the Dumbledores and the Merlins, and you know, they're the wise, all-knowing, fear my wrath types, and they don't care how it works. They just care about the power. You know, so that progressive aspect does kind of pull it out of the traditional urban fantasy genre a little bit, and kind of puts like some science fiction sprinkles on it just a little bit. But for the purposes of commerce, I classify it as dark urban fantasy.
I think that's the safe thing to do in the Amazon world.
Right.
You gotta have a place for people to start when they look for it.
Right.
But,
exactly.
But this book is so much more than what you think of when you think of urban fantasy. So I hope everybody goes and picks up a copy of Master of Hounds, the Pickman Files Book 1. It's on sale now, so if everybody will go pick up a copy, let's show Chuck Manley some love, and I know you're going to love this book. So, Chuck, thanks so much for coming on the show with me today.
Anytime, Hank. Thank you so much for having me, man.
Thanks for listening to the Author Stories podcast. For more great author interviews like this one, go to hankgarner.com and dig through the archives. There's something there I know you'll love. Now stay tuned for a special audio clip from Richard Gleaves' The Jason Crane series.
On the Wednesday night before Thanksgiving, Joey locked the doors of the Washington Irving Chapel and checked the windows from the outside, making sure that the cemetery offices were dark. Satisfied, he donned a knit cap and trudged uphill to the employee parking lot. He'd forgotten how desolate the grounds became at night. A fog had gathered, blurring the moon and stars. His rusty Volkswagen Beetle, christened Ladybug by Jason, sat in shadow alongside his dad's white van, which bore an image of the horseman and the cemetery's web address. Joey swept a palmful of condensation from Ladybug's windshield and fumbled for his keys. He heard a laugh, high and young. He froze. "Hello?" He shook off goose flesh and found his key. He started the engine and backed out, headlights off, praying not to knock over a headstone, again. A child stood on the hillside amongst the graves. "You okay, kid? Cemetery's closed." He turned on his headlights. The child vanished. Joey idled in the drive, frowning. What had just happened? He turned off the headlights and waited for his eyes to adjust. The silhouette reappeared. The child stood in the road now, blocking his way. He and the ghost stared at each other. He bit his tongue and squinted over the steering wheel. He couldn't resolve the ghost's features, only a tiny body in ruffles? Yes, a dress. A little girl with shoulder-length hair. The figure crouched, threw its arms over its head and skipped away. A giggle followed after. The ghost skipped up the hill, turned around, and beckoned through the fog. "Please come." Joey shook his head. No way. Ain't gonna happen. But he felt compelled to follow. What could a little girl do to him after all? He would keep a safe distance. The gravel sounded like soft rain beneath his tires. It drew him helplessly, past weeping cypresses and mausoleums blue with moonlight. He followed the giggle, the skipping ribbons, the little body made of shadow and quicksilver. The north end of the cemetery grounds rose to a steep wooded slope. The ghost had led him to Section 77, the northernmost boundary of the cemetery, but he'd lost her. He killed the engine, summoned his courage, and climbed out. The night air brought him fully awake. "Where are you?" he whispered, scanning the graves. A row of diseased hemlock trees stood at the fence line. Joey knew them well. They were dying, infested by some parasite called, he fished for the name, woolly adelgig. His crew had cut them back many times, lopping off limbs and heads, trying to save them. The hemlocks had grown back twisted and tormented. They stood as a row of grotesque sentinels guarding the threshold of the forest. The ghost climbed the slope, spun at the fence, and sat hugging her knees. The black mass of the Rockefeller State Park Preserve loomed behind her. "What do you want?" Joey whispered. "Play." He stepped forward, hands shaking. He just wanted to see her face, the face of a real ghost. To see the curve of her cheek, the sparkle that might have been her left eye. "Come and play, Joey." He froze. The sound of his name terrified him. She pointed over his shoulder. "Play with us." He turned and realized his mistake. He'd driven with his eyes on the girl, trying not to lose her, never looking behind. They had been followed.